today I'm going to have Josh Reeves, the creator of the movie The Secret Right, which exposes the secretive right wing of really the entire New World Order political spectrum, from the Council of National Policy, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the Vatican, the phony-controlled opposition of the Patriot Movement. It's an unbelievable film. I highly recommend everybody take a look at it. And Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lee, thanks for having me on again, man. I'm fired up tonight. This is going to be a great show.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think it will. And, it's really interesting because this film really gets into the secretive group, the Council for National Policy. I'm sure a lot of people out there who are regular listeners to my show and your show have really got their fill of what the Council for National Policy is. But I'm sure there's some people out there that might be listening for the first time. So can you give the novice, the novice listener to this broadcast and somebody who might not be familiar with the Council for National Policy, can you tell them how you found out about the Council for National Policy, what the Council for National Policy is, and why this group is so important?
Sure. And, the reason that I got into all this was, really the same way, Ray, that you did, Lee. We saw something was wrong. We wanted to do whatever we could do to make a difference, so we got involved with it. So in the very beginning, I was just as much of a Patriot Movement guy as anybody else. I listened to the big Patriot radio shows and supported Ron Paul and was just behind everything. And, I've been researching this stuff for, about 15 years or so, when I got Mike Chambers gave me a show on TrueNet Radio back in 2007. And I had just released my first film at that time, just released it a few weeks before that. It was called 9/11 New World Rising. And I was hot on the heels of starting a radio show, and I had my second show that I ever did. And that day, when I was getting prepared for the show, I'd gotten an email from a gentleman by the name of Professor Peter Dale Scott, and he had asked me. We had talked a few months back about him coming to Dallas and speaking at the premiere of my film, and we ended up having William Rodriguez instead. So we didn't get to have him, and he said, "Well, would you like to have me some other time?" And I said, "Well, I've already had the event, but I've just started a radio show." Today, would you like to come on as a guest today? And he immediately said, "Sure, I'll come on." And so, as you would have at that time, Lee, when, you got to think back to what we talked about and what we knew long before we knew anything about the CMP or any of this stuff. We just started talking about, the New World Order itself, because Peter Dale Scott, he'll straight up tell you that Al-Qaeda did 9/11. He's not a 9/11 truther, although I've heard him portrayed as such by certain individuals. He's not a 9/11 truther. But he does believe in government involvement. He doesn't call it conspiracy research. He calls it deep politics. And we were talking about the Trilateral Commission and whatnot, and he's basically said, look, those groups are put out there, and they're put out there in the spotlight because they're easy to identify, and because of their memberships and the people that are involved in the group, they're easy to identify as people in the power structure, and indeed they are. But who you need to look into is this group, a secretive, more powerful version of the CFR who controls religions and Blackwater and the military-industrial complex, and they're called the Council for National Policy. And he kind of messed up. He kind of said something that wasn't really necessarily true, but it got me digging nonetheless. He said they were based in Dallas. Well, subsequently, I found out they weren't. They're not based in Dallas, but they do have a lot of roots here, and a lot of the people that were in the ground floor of creating the group, like the Hunt Oil brothers, who gave the startup money to Tim LaHaye to start the group in 1981, or of course, we're here in Dallas. We shot footage at their big palatial mansion in here in Dallas, and it's in the new film Secret Right. And so that was my thing, is I started going, wait a second here, this is something I haven't heard of. So I started digging. I started looking that night after the show, stayed up till about 5 a.m. Just researching it after we'd got done doing the show. And I was just freaking out. I was just finding all this stuff was blowing my paradigm. I started finding names of people that were involved in the Patriot Movement that were in this group. People like Paul Craig Roberts, Larry Pratt, Phyllis Schlafly, Dr. Stanley Monteith, Chuck Missler, just on and on, all these different people that I'd seen involved in the Patriot Movement. I went, wait a second here, what's going on with this? And I started finding people that were at that time that had been, that I'd seen connected to Ron Paul, people that had been involved in the Reagan administration. And that was right in the heart of the Ron Paul campaign. And I remember the next day I had called Mike Chambers, and I said, hey, man, you got to look at this. You got to look at this information I found. Remember what Peter Dale Scott said yesterday? He was like, yeah. So Mike took a look at it, and we started talking, and Mike said, if this is what it is, then this could mean that people like Ron Paul and other people that we like could be involved in this. And me and Mike both kind of went, yeah, it does mean that, doesn't it? What are we going to do here? It's not like, I wasn't prepared to go on the air, Lee, on my third show with nobody knowing who the hell I was, where I came from, or anything else, and just come out and say, okay, the Patriot Movement's a whole fraud. Everybody here, don't trust Ron Paul, blah, 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 blah. I would have been eaten alive. I wouldn't be here talking to you today probably if had that happened. But, so we could have made the decision to say, okay, let's just sit on this. Let's not go too far into this right now because people just weren't ready for it at that time. The Ron Paul hysteria was going on. I mean, you couldn't even, at that time, you couldn't even suggest that Ron Paul may be, a career politician. I mean, much less try to suggest he may be involved with people like Grover Norquist and some of these other clowns we know he's been in.
Right. Well, Louis Larriman, especially. Yeah, Louis Larriman with his Gold Book. And he was a signatory of that PNAC document, which all these 9/11 truthers like to throw out there as gospel.
I mean, it would have been
crazy.
It would not. That would not have been the time to come out with it. But then, subsequently, as you were there as well doing radio shows, so subsequently as the campaign progressed and that big debacle happened in your state, in New Hampshire, goodness, Lee. I mean, to me, that was the indicator. And of course, the research that was right about the time. Right about the time. What's funny is I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that what happened in New Hampshire was sort of that was sort of the moment when you first started looking into the CNP, if I remember right, because that's when you started writing stuff about Jesse Benton. That, to me, I remember that being kind of the moment that sort of went, okay, there may be something to this.
Oh, definitely. And Josh, we're up against a break. I think I hear the music coming in. But yeah, absolutely. Essentially what happened is that the Ron Paul campaign, for whatever reason, they intentionally, you can draw up your own theory as to why this was the case, but they intentionally tanked the campaign as far as I'm concerned, because the way they went about promoting Ron Paul as a candidate, the way they went about spending all the money we gave them was completely ridiculous and the opposite of the way all these other campaigns are spending their money. But we'll be back with Josh Reeves, the producer of the new film, The Secret Right, and we'll be right back to dive into more of this fantastic and fascinating information. Stay with us.